And good evening, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of the African American Athlete. I'm Ricky Hampton. I'll be joined by our co-host, Mike Robinson, will be joining us shortly. Uh, I'm also joined, I have two very special guests tonight. I have the great author and historian, Earl Kitchen, the author of the great book on Black quarterbacks. Hold on, I'm having getting a little feedback here. Let me see if I can fix that. Earl is the author of The Forgotten Quarterbacks. We'll get into that. And one of the legends of college football is joining us tonight. Newly minted inductee into the Black College Hall of Fame, the one and only Joe 747 Adams, the Tennessee State University legend, who's part of the 2024 Black College Hall of Fame football uh, class inductees that was just announced the other day. Joey, welcome and congratulations, my brother.
Thanks, Rick. Appreciate it. Look forward to this whole thing. It's a treat, no question about it. And of course, you know as well as I do, things like this don't occur unless you had a lot of people, that you were surrounded by, number one, and some very, very uh, well coaches. So I'm thankful and I'm appreciative to being here on your show and being inducted. No question about it.
Yeah, and let me you were part of a class that included Antoine Bethea from Howard, another Big Blue Tiger, Wayman Bryant, who was the number 4 pick in the 1974 NFL draft, which his teammate Ed Too Tall Jones was the number 1 pick.
Yeah,
That's just freaking incredible.
incredible.
Kevin Dent, the Jackson State defensive back, Richard Huntley uh, from Winston-Salem University, Lamar Parrish, great defensive back who played several years with the Cincinnati Bengals out of Lincoln University, and the legendary Morgan State coach Edward Hurt. I mean, and Joey, we were talking before we went on the air. I mean, this is a great class, but when you look at every class of the Hall of Fame that's gone in since it began in 2011, there are just some unbelievable players that you are now in the Hall of Fame with.
That's no question about it. Um, and that's one of the that's one of the things that really makes this a special moment for me, because when you look at those class, when you look at that group, if you would, you've got a lot of great people over the years who've paid their dues and now are being inducted. I'm totally honored, no question about it, Rick. Totally honored. Just kind of in awe about the whole thing, to be honest about it. And it really hasn't totally sunk in, because as you were reading off those names, I had to kind of go to my phone here to look at the people that are inducted, and I find it to be just totally awesome to be a part of this whole thing. No question about it.
And Earl, I definitely want to have you in on this conversation tonight with your great history of Black college athletics. Help us break down what Black college football has meant to this sport over the years and what it's given to the sport of football in America.
Well, again, congratulations, Joe, man. I mean, well-deserved honor. I think for those of us who were around when you were playing, I think whenever we call your name, it's always the emphasis on 747 when we talk about you and your exploits at Tennessee State. So you did rightfully deserve that. But to answer your question, Ricky, I think Black college football has been such a phenomenal part of college history in America that is probably still not gotten all the proper due that it should be getting, simply because it was always seen from a distance. It always, kind of an anomaly at times. But for those of us who have grown up around it, I mean, I grew up around FAMU football from day one. I mean, I remember going to watch FAMU play football games when I was 7, 8 years old, because when I had grandparents who lived in Tallahassee. And for those of us who have been around this game and watch all the great college football players who have come, it was remarkable, because it was almost like always watching an all-star game anytime two teams played against one another. I mean, if FAMU played whomever came to Tallahassee and Bragg Stadium, you look back at it now and say, man, there's a lot of all-stars that played these games, and we had a chance to see them firsthand like we did. It was just amazing. So, and then the other part is that the iconic coaches we had to help make the game what it has become, and to make it what it was in those earlier years, from a Jake Gaither to a John Merritt to Eddie Robinson to a Coach Mumford out at Southern to Billy Nix out at Prairie View. These guys and the players they had, and all these things wrapped into one man, make our football, Black college football, special and unique. And if it doesn't mean anything to anybody else, it's going to always mean the world to us, simply because that's our football. That's our football. Nobody can take that away from us. If you went to HBCU, that's my football, man. And I've seen you guys play in Bragg. I've seen you play in the Orange Bowl at the Orange Blossom Classic, watching on TV. And just to hear stories about the guys, if you didn't see them play, but to hear the stories about guys talking about teammates, or when they played, against schools. And I'll say one thing, man. It just seemed like Jay Gaither could never beat Tennessee State. That seemed to be his nemesis, man. Big John always had Jake's number, but but that made it what it was. I mean, these guys were just these iconic coaches, and they produced some iconic guys like our guest tonight, because he's definitely an iconic guy, man. I mean, I never saw him play in college, but man, I heard the name, and like I said, that man, watching that media guy when they took a picture of him in the cockpit of a jetliner, man, on the 747 at the airport somewhere, and I don't, that's the other part that we have, Ricky. I don't think the other colleges have nicknames, man. We got nicknames of guys that just stick with them. I mean, it's like you get a nickname, man, and this becomes iconic. Man, that's what people know you by.
Hey, Joey, I've heard the story, but to our viewers out there, how did 747 come about? Because really, everywhere else in most of college football at that time, it was Woody Hayes 3 yards in a cloud of dust. People running the option. But Tennessee State, y'all are slinging that ball around.
Always.
Yeah, no question about it. Ricky, that's an interesting question. Prior to going to Tennessee State, like you said, it was a tradition that nicknames was just a common way of showing an endurance for the people that you were around, and so it was common. Before I got there was Jefferson Street Joe, there was Too Tall Jones, there was, John.
The Lord's Prayer, Eldridge Dickey.
Yeah, so forth and so on. The way I recall it, and there's a couple stories. We had a sports information director, Kendall Stevens, who at that time was not only the sports information director, but he actually called on radio the Tennessee State football games, and in particular, the week, which it came out the week after, rather, was when we played Florida A&M, FAMU. And from what I understand, he and one of his assistants kind of dubbed the name on their radio show. because of the fact that we threw the ball at that particular time. We threw it 48 times that game, and we completed 30 out of 48. So there was a lot of passes being thrown, quite a bit of being completed, and it just kind of stuck. I mean, I heard it the next day or two, or the next week. I thought it was corny. Uh, I didn't use it, but it just was one of those things when you were at a college like Tennessee State, when they gave you a nickname, whether you was ready for it or not, it
Yep.
stuck. And that's kind of like, as I recall it, occurring. And it's just been that way since, whether it's 747 or 7 or 47. Um, Usually it's people that I knew, like Ricky. We all went to college together. And of course, guys that I played with. Um, and that's usually how it works to this day. Not only my nickname, but others' nicknames are still valid and in recognition to that particular person. So as I recall it, that's the way it occurred. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's the same way at most of the HBCUs where the legendary players, uh, uh, Bullet Bob Hayes
Yeah.
at FAMU. I mean, you knew that was going to be the case. Hey, you're from Gulfport, Mississippi. How did you end up at TSU? And were you highly recruited coming out of high school? And if I remember, y'all kind of ran the ball in high school.
Yeah. Interesting, Ricky. Interesting question. As I think back on it, I'm just sitting here, my mind just shot back 45, 50 years ago. I initially, I was set to go to Alabama. My brother, who was a junior college All-American, just signed with Alabama. I was just getting out of high school. And so when they came to our home, um, my mom indicated that, I've got another boy that's a senior. They offered me a scholarship, but they offered me a scholarship to play safety. Now, of course, a skinny kid, 6'2", 6'3", 170 pounds. It just wasn't something that I was, cut out for, right? Wanted to play quarterback. And then obviously that situation occurred. I actually signed with Jackson State. I didn't sign. I signed a letter of intent with them, and then I decommitted. Now, at that time, decommitting was not something that it was kind of frowned upon in the NCAA. But as long as you didn't actually physically go and enroll into the college, the NCAA called my father and said it was just a gentleman's agreement. Now, it ended up being a lawsuit my freshman year at Tennessee State, but it was one that was thrown out by the state of Tennessee. So that's kind of like how that happened. Initially, Tennessee State did not recruit me. They thought that I was going to go and play with Bob Hill, who was the coach at Jackson State at that time. But he ended up getting fired that spring, which then brought in, I think, Coach Gordon, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, W.C. Gordon.
WC.
Yeah, who had decided to, he wanted to implement more of a ground and pound, kind of veer type of offense. And so knowing that, obviously my second choice, which should have been my first choice, was Tennessee State. And again, they had already started practice. I was late getting there. And through the grace of God and, kind of leading me down that path, finally I ended up making my way to Nashville late August. I think they had already been on the field practicing for 2 weeks. And so coming in, obviously, as maybe a fourth or fifth, maybe a sixth string quarterback from that particular time, it was just a matter of catching on to what they were doing, what they were teaching, because obviously when you go to a school like that, there's an operation. There's something that's going on before you get there, right? And so you got to play catch up. So that was kind of like the way it worked out for me. Unbeknown, going there, I had no idea I did know that Joe Gilliam played football there. It was one of the things that my parents and I talked about. Um, and it was a family agreement that, if I decided that I wanted to go there, you know what I mean, that I had to go all in. I had to go all in, no more changing. If this is where you're gonna go, let's make the phone calls, let's make the connections. And that took a little longer than we thought, because again, they're practicing, they're coaching, or doing their jobs. And finally I did get a chance to speak to Coach Gillum, and I think that kind of got the ball rolling. And of course, looking back on it to this day, there's still a lot of blanks in my mind how it really actually all kind of came together, because we finally got the call and a plane ticket, which allowed me to go from Gulfport to Nashville. Again, there's a lot of blanks even to this day when I think about it on how it actually occurred. If I had to really guess, I would say that Bob Hill, who was a student of John Merritt, very, very close, very, very close. I would think that those two at some point got together and kind of made that happen, if you know what I mean.
So Joe, I just gotta, I'm laughing, man, because you hear a story and then you hear the myth of a story. And the story that you told, I'm sure that's the way it went, but the story that I heard was nothing even close to how you got to Tennessee State. Not even close. So what I was told, like I said, some stories become the myth and then the myth becomes reality. But what I heard was that you were on the practice field at Jackson State and Big John drove his Cadillac on the practice field at Jackson State, put you in his Cadillac, and drove you back to Nashville, and that's how you ended up at Tennessee State. I was like, what? And he drove up on the field and took him. I'm like, wow. I said, Big John was a bad man. So that was the myth that I was told, man. And it's like, I'm like, wow. So I'm glad you kind of smoothed that out, because that was what I heard. And it's like, okay, well, till somebody tells me different, I gotta go with it. It makes for a good conversation. If nothing
else. I like that story better, man.
I tell you, it's just amazing. One other thing that I feel to add, and it's interesting. I'm remembering these things because you asked that question. There was a guy who was an assistant to Bob Hill. They referred to him as Shorty the Bobber. To this day, I don't know his name. I can't tell you his name, but he was a guy that kind of started the whole ball rolling the spring of 1977. I met him in Jackson, Mississippi at a track meet. I ran track my senior year, just trying to stay in shape. And the guy, he was a very short guy. I would say if he was 5 feet, I would probably be stretching it. But anyway, he was a guy that first made the introduction to me about Coach John Merritt, because I hadn't talked to Coach Merritt at that time. I really didn't. But he did drive up to the track meet in a Cadillac. Now, whether John Merritt was in that Cadillac or not, I don't know. I don't know. But he came and he gave me a phone number to call. And so when I got back from Jackson, Mississippi, which is the capital of Mississippi, I lived on the coast. Jackson was about 150 miles north. My high school coach, along with my parents, we did contact Coach Merritt, and then the rest is kind of, again, a lot of blank spaces, but some kind of way a plane ticket was sent to Gulfport, and off to Nashville I went. So yeah, that's kind of how it happened, to the best of my knowledge, looking back on it. Yeah.
Okay.
Again, I don't know if he was in that car or not, but I do know so it could
Hey,
be something to that.
Well, all that
Yeah.
mattered is that you got to Tennessee State and you became
Yeah.
one of the most prolific quarterbacks in the history of Tennessee State. And the
Yeah.
rest of the story is just good
It's
myth
history.
and fodder. But the truth is, you became the legend 747 that thrilled Tennessee State fans and put shrills in everybody else, because it's like, man, here he comes with that gun that he's got, man, and that's always smoking. That 747 always smoking. And man, y'all just let people have it. So hey.
Let me step in here and introduce my co-host, friend, and frat brother, Mike Robinson. Mike, welcome, brother.
All right.
You,
Well, let me
you,
apologize to our esteemed guests because, of course, I'm TSU also. I had to cover Stanford women basketball in a midday game, and then, of course, coming back across the bridge with traffic going on because it's rush hour over here. So I apologize for not getting here on time for.
we're just getting started, brother. So you're good.
Well, for the Boeing 747. So, but yeah, but my question, right away is dealing with your stature, and then of course, congratulations also. But I just had the scenario where I had to almost get into an argument with Coach Shanahan about Trey Lance, and then of course the whole Kaepernick thing. So, being that you got drafted by this organization, what was your feeling about what happened with Kaepernick? How they kind of said, "Yeah, we believe in your protest, but you got to get out of here." And then of course Trey got pretty much pushed away, and I pretty much got on Shanahan about you didn't give him a real chance if he's talking about you want to evaluate him. And so, what is your opinion on those two scenarios?
Well, yeah, the Kaepernick situation, I think it kind of played itself out, you know, to the football world as it did. There could be a lot of jabs could be taken one side or the other. I mean, if you look at what, for instance, when I guess the guy named is Tebow from down in Florida.
Tim
When
Tebow?
he took a knee,
Tim Tebow. Yeah.
yeah, it was looked at as being something honorable. It was looked at something being sympathetic towards a cause, right? Whatever his cause may have been. Whereas with Kaepernick, you clearly saw that he was judged harshly, not only by his peers but other people around the country. And then I think the effect is kind of snowballed to the point where it just made it impossible for any football team to lay stock with the guy, and that was unfortunate. I mean, we saw that kind of play out, and it just appeared that the wave above his head was just so great that you could kind of see the writing on the wall that he wasn't going to be connected with another football team, and that's been the case ever since. Now, other than that, then obviously, I probably could say that situation is probably above my pay grade. The thing with Lance that we saw, it was just so unfortunate that if you think about it, if you look at the time that he actually played as a collegiate player and the success that he had, and then looking at the potential in that West Coast style offense that Shanahan ran, that was a shining light on that kid, no question about it. But I just think, unfortunately, because of his injury, and then the ascension of this kid, Birdie, all of a sudden come along, it was a tough call to be in, considering what they had given up to get him. Now, all things equal, you would have to say that based on the fact that what Birdie did ascended more so over him, and it kind of saved their jobs is what it did. I mean, because if you look at the fact that you gave up 4 or 5 picks and then to have this guy who was one of your picks, which was the last pick, to actually turn out to be beneficial. I think they just basically took it and ran with it, and they realized that they could cut their costs, they cut their losses, and move forward, and hopefully he get an opportunity, to play on another team in another situation. But I mean, if you're looking back on it in hindsight, you would have to say what they did was was beneficial for the team, and it was a great move. I mean, you would have to say that. But it was a tough one. That was a tough call, because you would think the way that this kid operated, he was perfect for that offense. I mean, he was a perfect guy for that offense. But I think, again, I would look back at this. Football. You take a guy like Birdie, who played 4 years. This kid played 4 years of football. And then you look at Lance, who had such a limited amount of time in which he played. The nuances of that game, and Ricky and I have talked about it before. The nuances of that game, and particularly playing that position, things are second nature, if I could put it that way. And a lot of times, perhaps where Lance would be looking, Birdie would be throwing, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
and that's a skill set that's developed. It is. And it's an innate ability to do it. And then some guys will do it a little later in the game. But you could clearly see that one guy who had the experience of doing it for 4 years, opposed to a guy probably more physical attributes, had only done it 1 year, and then unfortunately only got a chance to showcase it for a preseason. I think he got hurt the first game.
Yeah, and that was in a monsoon.
Yep.
Yeah. And so, and you know how that game is. So all things equal, the way it played out is probably going to be continually talked about. But there's no question in my mind, if we have to just look back on it right now, today, and say what occurred, it probably was the best thing for both, because now Lance has an opportunity to play behind the guy there at Dallas.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to be thrown in the fire. He has a chance now to kind of really study the game, really get some hours of studying that NFL style game. Because when you look at the multiplicities of defenses that they come at you with, it requires a lot of experience. You know that. There's no question about it. And Birdie seems to have it. That's my point.
Joey, I love when we get you on to have you talk about that position, because you told, I think it was Mike and I once, and it's always stuck with me, playing quarterback in the National Football League is like taking graduate studies in college in a master class of physics or something along that nature.
It is. Especially today, when the quarterback controls so much at the line of scrimmage. He's not only got to control the line of scrimmage, giving the blocking assignments, but then he's also have to master dealing with these Omega type defenses today, where they show you one thing, and then of course when the ball is snapped, you're actually confronting something totally different. And that comes through experience. I mean, think about it. It's like it's like being under fire and forcing yourself to ignore that fire in order to keep your focus on something that's occurring at a glance. And you've got to recognize that at a glance, and then be able to, respond to that correctly within the scheme that you're trying to implement on a defense. And that's that's a very tough thing. These guys, the money.
And how much time do you have to process that, Joey?
About 2.5 seconds, 2.5 to 2.8 seconds. You know what I mean?
What if I hold it 3.5? What if I hold it 3.5 seconds?
Well, you may run into Fred Williams, that outside linebacker for the 49ers, and let me tell you, those guys, they come with a bad intent. You know what I mean? They come with a very, very bad intent. And you see that happening every day. Every week you see it happen. You see the ones who have somewhat mastered it. You see the ones that have great coaching, uh, great experience at doing it. Again, it's something that you just have to do. And it's like life, you're better through your experiences, right? And you have to be given the opportunity to fail in order to do well. And that has a lot to do with it. And that's what I think Trey may have gotten caught up in.
I'm listening to you say that. I'm here in Detroit, and when the Lions traded for Jared Goff, I'm like, man, this guy is a bum. And I owe him an apology because, man, you give him a clean pocket, he is as precise as a laser, gentlemen. And he processes that stuff. But once you get after him, it gets a little different.
Hey, Joe, let me ask you this question. In this time where these pro teams are taking these college quarterbacks before they complete 4 years of being in college football, if they leave after their sophomore year, they leave after their junior year, or if they leave after 4 years and they put them in these starting positions right away, it doesn't seem like that's fair to them. Even though they've drafted them and they're paying them all this money, it doesn't seem fair because you're asking someone to jump into an experience that they have no idea of what that experience is like, and you want them to be successful. And then when they're not, then you heap on all of this negativity. It's like, this guy's just coming out of a situation and you want him to know about pro football. He's never done pro football. So what's your take on that?
That's just the nature of the game. You see that occurring, as you said, quite often. The guy that comes to mind just right off the bat was I could use the guy that Ricky used, Goff, when he first came out. Of course, he did make it to the Super Bowl, but they lost that against the Patriots. And if you would perhaps taken the first 3 years of him coming out, you probably say the guy's a bum. But now you could see through that experience, and it's all about that experience. The game slows down a little bit more. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Initially, when you come in, it's fast because again, you're not talking about college. You're talking about guys who are playing this game 360 days a year. This is their job. This is a pay for play. They've got the access. Whereas a college student, we play the game for 6 months, 5 months out of the year. And then from that point, according to the NCAA rules, you're not even allowed to go back on the field until the spring, right? Whereas you got professional guys who, again, it's a pay for play for pay. It's a business. You've got coordinators who are studying your tendencies. And again, let me jump back to Jared Goff. Even though he played well here in Los Angeles, he had one of those guys, McVay, who's kind of came out of that same mold with Shanahan, that West Coast offense where it's all about 1, 2, 3 progression, and it's a simple thing. We did it at Tennessee State 45 years ago. It's a really simple thing, but it's not something that you're gonna roll on the field and be able to master for some time. You're gonna have to be put on the fire. You're gonna have to be allowed to fail. And I think with Jared Goff, his instance, he was allowed to fail. And then as a result of that, you see what he is now. Now I take on the other hand, you take this kid with Philadelphia. They was ready to write him off a few years ago.
Yeah.
But he was allowed to fail. And now you see a guy that's just exceptional. You don't get a whole host of these kids like Mahomes or, Manning or even Manning. When Manning came in, if you remember, he led the league in interceptions. Again, you're being allowed to fail. And so when you're allowed to fail, if you are worth your salt, then you're going to be able to adjust. You're going to be able to see things a lot clearer. The game slows down to you. And then if you've got what it takes, then obviously you can master. You can actually be considered one of the masters in the game. Because again, we're talking about guys that are coming, trying to knock your head off. And you are actually, you're tasked with standing up and standing and looking through that, you know, to be an efficient passer in the NFL. These are tough things that we're talking about. And so we see that. I take the kid at Chicago right now. They're ready to write him off. But if you look at the fact the kid's had 3 different coordinators in 3 years, who knows
Justin
what he may
Fields.
become? Yeah, who knows what he may become and what he may not become. But hopefully they, you know, they allow him this year to go out and, you know, play the game at the highest level. Because he was a prolific player in college, and then the hope is that that carries over to the pros. It doesn't always happen, but that's the hope. But I think it comes to answer your question. I think it comes to having the ability to fail, to see if you can actually right the wrongs that occurred the year before, and then go on to have some type of positive influence on the team. Drew Brees, Brady, all of these guys was given that opportunity. Brett Favre, I mean, you can just name them. You can name them. And then you can name some guys that they recycle consistently because they drafted them in high positions. That just didn't work out. It just didn't work out. But I just think the best way to sum it up is just, you just got to be put in a position to where you're going to fail, and then have the wherewithal or the coaching that you're surrounded with to kind of, keep you moving in a certain direction. That's always important in my book. Yeah. And that's what I always look at when I look at these quarterbacks, the progression from one year to the next. And there's a host of quarterbacks out there today that you're seeing that. That's why passing records are just falling like hotcakes, and how prolific they're throwing the ball. Look at this guy, Tua. They were ready to write him off, and look at what he's doing now. They brought in this coach, Michael, whatever his name is, and just like that, the kid began to play football the way that we saw him play down in Alabama. So again, I always look at that when I look at these quarterbacks. Are you given the opportunity to fail? Does the team have enough wherewithal to be patient with you? And I think that's all important. Yeah.
All right. Well, my question is this. Well, we saw Marino get to the Super Bowl in year 2, but he still had growing pains too. But do you think that the Manning brothers had a distinct advantage, being that their father was a quarterback and a pretty good quarterback? So they kind of would been ingrained in their mind of some of the things that they would be looking out for when they got to the league. And they both did pretty well, even though we said Peyton had a lot of interceptions, but he was almost ready-made for the league when he came in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about it. You got a father from the early age, as long as you probably can go back with these guys, had the ability to show them the difference between a single high and double high safeties. You only can run so much. I mean, you're going to be single high or you're going to be double high. That's well, you can't do anything else. And there's certain things that you're going to be able to do out of single high, and there's certain things you're going to be able to do a double high. Now, with these Amigo defense, they can try to switch it up on you, but you can only imagine having a father like that, the advantage that it gave them. I look at this kid in Colorado with Deion. I saw an interview where Deion coached him in high school. I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. And he talked about it, that one of the first things he did was teach his son, the nuances of defenses, what they could do and what they couldn't do, the advantages and the disadvantages, the weaknesses and the strengths. And you can see, in my opinion, he probably showcased himself, probably be one of the top quarterbacks who played football last year, for the exception of this kid, in Southern Cal. it's clear that these guys understand defenses. They understand how to deal with defenses. They understand their strengths, their weaknesses, and how to exploit them. So yeah, to answer your question, the Manning boys, they were when they went into college and when they came out of college, they had an enormous amount of experience, whether it was one style or one system or the other. They knew the nuances of defenses. They were playing chess with the defensive coordinators more so than they was playing against the players on the field, if you know what I mean by that.
Yeah.
In other words,
Mm-hmm.
when they came to the line, they were playing the defensive coordinator, his tendencies, what his father had taught them, to go back and look at what these guys had did, when they did it, how they did it. And these are things that translated to those guys, and they utilized it to the best of their ability and for their benefit. That's something that I would do if I had a son that was, into football. And so, yeah, I'm sure the Mannings, those boys, and it was clear and obvious the way that they played the game. They knew what was going on. I mean, they knew what was going on from the rip. Once they got in that center, they knew what was going on from the rip, and you could clearly see that was the case. Yeah.
You're watching the African American Athlete live stream with myself, Rick Hampton, and my co-host Mike Robinson. We're joined by the great author and historian Earl Kitchen, a quarterback back, and we have our special guest tonight, legendary Tennessee State University quarterback Joe 747, who's a member of the Black College Football Hall of Fame class. Joe was going in with some other great players. Antoine Bethea from Howard, a fellow Big Blue Tiger, Wayman Bryant, Kevin Dent from Jackson State, Richard Huntley, the running back from Winston-Salem State University, the great defensive back, Lamar Parrish from Lincoln University, and Ed Hurt, the legendary Morgan State University coach. And speaking of legends, Joey, you played for two. John Merritt at Tennessee State, and when you were in San Francisco, Bill Walsh. Can you talk to us a little bit about them and how TSU prepared you for the next level of football, making that jump from college to professional football?
Well, that's a good question. Bill Walsh was he was a master of the West Coast offense. He's given credit for it, which really is the old Paul Brown offense.
Mm-hmm.
What you saw Ken Anderson do for years when everybody else was grounding and pounding and running 3 yards in the cloud. If you remember the old Cincinnati Bengals, they were like firing the ball all over the place, right? So that old Paul Brown. Also, what was the legendary coach up in Minnesota?
Bud Grant.
Bud Grant.
Van Brocklin?
No, Bud Grant.
Bud Grant, okay.
Eric Coryell, who was down with the San Diego.
There you go.
These guys they were innovators in the forward pass. In other words, they were more conscientious of, we're going to throw the ball forward. The old Oakland Raiders with Al Davis. And so coming to Tennessee State, when you come to Tennessee State, you go in one direction or the other, like a bifurcation. You either were going to be sent over to play with the great Joe Gillum Sr., who was our defensive coordinator, or Cat Coleman or Alvin Coleman, who was a disciple or a student of the Paul Brown's offense, ally the West Coast offense. So what we did, and a lot of other Black schools for that matter, to my recollections, is we had a notion that we were going to throw the ball around. That was Coach Merritt's, that was his approach. Our approach was that, by the time you look up, we could be 3-4 plays and we could move the ball 80 yards for a score. And then we would play a very tough, stringent defense to force you into doing what you would have to do in order to keep up with us. And that was a formula that they use before I got there, and when I got there, and well, not so much now, but the formula was that we were going to throw the football. We were going to get ahead of you, and then we were going to force you to do certain things just to keep up with this. So when I went to San Francisco, a lot of the concepts, the nuances in which they taught, a little different terminology, was what I had learned at Tennessee State my 4 years there working with Coach Alvin Coleman, which is a progressive offense. In other words, the whole idea was to put more people in an area than your opponent, and then as a result, you would win. In other words, if we use motion and sets, we could outflank you on your weak side, and then we would force you to declare what type of defense you were utilizing, and then use the audible system to again outflank you. So that was something that the West Coast system was designed to do. It's what I did as a college, certainly not at the magnitude in which they did it, but we did it. I tell my son today a lot of things that I see that they're doing right now today in the NFL. It's things that we did, 45 years ago, such as outflanking you, using motions and sets, attack in the middle of the field. Our theme was when you constrict, then we expand. And when you expand, we constrict. Cat Coleman's philosophy was, I had never heard a man talk like that, is that the defense is in the wrong defense the time that they step on the field. That was our approach. That was the way that we went about play football. So I see that, and I see it with Miami. I see it with the 49ers. I see it with particularly the guy there in Kansas City. These are old guys that comes from that old West Coast offense, and you see it ingrained in the way that they do. They attack the middle, they make you constrict, and then when you constrict, then they expand. When you expand, then they constrict. And it's a cat and mouse game, but it's a very difficult. As you can see, it's a very, very difficult offense to stop, because really, if you're going to put more people in an area than they have defenders, then likely you should win. If you got a decent quarterback and guys who capable of reading the coverage on the running, or all synchronized, then you win. So that's that West Coast offense. So my affiliation with Coach Merritt via Cat Coleman and Bill Walsh was connected through that philosophy in football. We're going to throw it to get ahead, run it to win. And so often you see that same philosophy in the NFL today. We're going to throw it to get ahead, and then we'll run it to win. So that's you know what I mean? That's the connection that I had. And then of course, growing up in Canada, a lot of those concepts were used there as well, big time up there, because you only have 3 downs and to get a first down, so you're virtually throwing the ball every down. So yeah, the connection that I had with Coach Merritt via Coach Coleman and Coach Walsh was that West Coast offense, and I found it to be something that you just didn't grasp the first year, or maybe the second year. I can honestly say that things that Coach Coleman taught me, there were some integral parts that he taught that I probably didn't really understand until the latter part of my junior year, and then maybe all of my senior year, coming there from a 17-year-old from high school. Yeah. So that's why I'm very adamant about you need time to pick up on all the little nuances. We had the nuances, the checks. Yeah. And that would be my answer. That would be the connection between Bill Walsh and Coach John Merritt, a la Coach Alvin Coleman.
Oh, hey Joe. One thing that doesn't get talked about a lot of times, especially when we're talking about prolific passing offenses, is the fact that offensive line, those 5 guys up front that provide you that time to make the passes or to give you the time to throw. How much time when you were at Tennessee State did you and the offensive line practice in order to get that synchronization? Because you had to have a lot of confidence in guys to give you that kind of time, beyond 3 seconds. Because I've watched Tennessee State sometimes, and you and Jefferson Street, man, y'all sit back there 4, 5, 6, 10 seconds. Y'all having a cup of coffee and stuff. Y'all got so much time. But talk a little bit about the importance of those 5 guys, because the offensive linemen, they're the last group of guys that get any press or any publicity. But when they're protecting you the way they did and giving you that much time, how important was that to you?
It was important. There's no question about it. I think what I could use as an example, and I like to use this. The 2 teams that I like looking at mostly is I like watching Kansas City, and I just love watching San Francisco, and also the Rams here in Los Angeles. What they do and how they matriculate the game with their offensive line. Here's what I mean by that. Usually what gave us perhaps the biggest advantage is we would constantly move the pocket. What I mean by that is we just didn't give you a steady diet of 5 or 7 step drops. We would often move the pocket right, left, and then there was a lot of play action that went along with that, which bought you time. And our whole idea, really the whole idea, was to wear the defense out with our passing game by moving the pocket and giving them looks and then counter off of those looks. So the whole idea was to come out and be prolific in throwing the football and giving them the same looks and then run off of those looks. So what that did, it kind of slowed the lineman down, because you give them one look and you're doing one thing, and then you counter with something else, giving them the same look. Now you've got a little, and it's a slight hesitation. It's a slight hesitation to see exactly where the quarterback is. And that was a way of psychologically wearing them down, letting them know you're not going to get to the quarterback, and literally trying to make them quit. I mean, that's the concept of the West Coast offense, is to make the lineman quit. So by the 4th quarter, you pretty much, if things are going right, do whatever you would want to do, because obviously you've given them one look, and you showed them one thing, and you've given that same look. And I love San Francisco, the 49ers. If you watch them, they are constantly giving you look after look that's very similar. They do it here a lot in the guy here in Los Angeles. And that protects the quarterback. Mm-hmm. It protects the quarterback because you just don't know where he is. So, yeah, that it's a ballet. It's a ballet. It really is. It's really a ballet. And you've got to have good linemen with good feet. And for the most part, I think I was fortunate enough to play with guys who were of that mode, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Michael?
All right. Well, Joe, I want to talk about our alma mater. So we have some issues with Eddie complaining about the attendance. And of course, we had our big game in South Bend that I actually covered. So that was a great experience, and got a chance to meet the bus. And then now we got a 2-year window where we're going to play against Howard, first in DC, then they come to Nashville for homecoming. So what is your thought process of our great alma mater right now, the football part of it?
It's interesting you mentioned that. I had a chance to talk to Doug Williams, who gave me a call on the introduction into the HBCU Hall of Fame, and that was the topic of our conversation. And I don't think he would mind if I spoke to you guys openly about it, because we talk openly about it. They've got a great thing that's going on with the Centennial Bowl. I think it is. They just had it. Is it Centennial
Celebration Bowl? Celebration Bowl.
Celebration Bowl. Yeah.
Where they crowned a black national championship. And I think it's been going on for the last, I don't know, 3 to 5 years. And it's a legitimate way of doing it opposed to the way that it had been done in the past. The conversation spilled over to the fact that not only Tennessee State, but I think Doug may have given, I don't know, 10, 11, 12 other HBCU schools because of the fact that they are aligned with other conferences. They obviously are not eligible to play in that game. An interesting point that he brought up, and that we all are looking at right now, that's really going on before our eyes. As an example, here in California, the Pac-12, as we know it, no longer exists. You've got UCLA, USC, the Washington schools. I'm sorry, the Oregon schools. They're all going to the Big Ten next year. So I think there's 2 teams that's left, which is not enough to even.
Let me interject because I covered them. So yeah, it's Washington and Oregon, and then LA schools are going to the Big Ten. Here in the Bay, they were kind of left out, but they're both Cal and Stanford are both going to the ACC.
Yeah.
So yeah, Oregon State and I think Washington State are the ones that are left over since the Pac-2. Yeah.
Right. So essentially, what you've got there, what you've got is an alignment of 4 major conferences. I mean, that's what it's going to be, right? And the point that Doug brought up, which I thought was and let me just hop to that, is what you see with HBC schools right now. The alignment as such as it is standing right now is you've got the MEAC, you've got the SWAC, who at the end of the year play for a national championship. And during that time, I think it's the only game that's on town. And I'll share this with you. I've shared it with Ricky. I work at a company. I work for the Judd family. It's a private equity company. I had my friends come to me. These are my friends. These are my Caucasian friends, if you would. And they asked me, they says, look, when did the HBC schools come around? I go, what do you mean by that? I was really taken by it. I said, we've been around 100 years. Google it. They were shocked. It was to their amazement because most white people, this is what they thought. They thought the commercials that have been going on for years, a black mind is a terrible thing to waste, the Negro College Fund was the reasons why most blacks you would see at PW schools. That's what they actually thought, had no idea that it was actually HBCU schools. Now, this was amazing to me because they said that they watched the game, they loved the pantry, they watched the bands. There was nothing to do. There was no football on. They were just football people. And to have them to say that to me, it just really kind of blew my mind. And I shared this with Doug, and we talked about it. So my point is what Doug is doing, and I'm trying to circle back to your question. What they're really trying to do, and I really support it, is to create an alignment. There's about 10 or 12 different presidents around the country that they're really touting right now to make this thing happen. Because as far as I'm concerned, the last I knew, we are still an HBCU school. Now, here's my point. Because you've got the 4 major conferences right now, then that means that we're now relegated to the FBS, I think it is.
FCS.
Yeah.
FCS.
So now
FCS, yeah.
Yeah. So we're now all, right? We're all now clouded together with everyone else. Outside of those 4 conferences, right? Then we're with everyone else. Why not align ourselves to where HBC schools now, particularly with the advent of streaming television. Listen, guys, I watch every game for Tennessee State right here in Los Angeles. I spend $40 a year on ESPN Plus, and I watch Tennessee State football. I watch Grambling football. I watch Jackson State football. And if you notice, they're now starting to amp up with their advertisement. It appears to me, and I don't know this totally in its totality. I don't know all the intricate workings, but in talking with Doug, it was only about a 30, 40-minute conversation. That's where that's their focus. Their focus is to do an alignment the way that the alignments are happening with the Big Ten, the ACC, the SEC, and the others. Because think about it, they're not going to give us any endowment. They're not going to give us any endowment to bring us up to their level. You know, they're not going to do that. I mean, they didn't do it 60 years ago or 80 years ago when they came in and got all the black athletes, if you get my meaning. They took the athletes, but they didn't give Grambling, they didn't give Tennessee State, they didn't give Southern the endowments to bring them into these private conferences. They didn't do that. And I don't suspect that they're going to do it now. So what Doug and these people are doing, they're thinking in terms of what I'm trying to say. And I'm probably doing a poor job of articulating it, but I kind of got an idea of what they want to do. To be specific about our coach who made what I call the dumbest statement that he probably could have made, unaware of what was actually going on, that he was going to bring Tennessee State up to the Power 5 elite in 3 to 5 years. That's a farce. We all know that. So I think these guys are learning on the job that where they are, we're just not there. We're not even close to being there. And as far as what he opened his mouth again and said, as far as the students supporting Tennessee State, people love Tennessee State. They love football there. There's no question about it. There was a lot of buzz about it. But I think where they're really overlooking the fact is that their core values, let's say from 500 to 1,000 miles away, where people have gone to Tennessee State, they've left, they have jobs, they have families, they would love to bring their kids back for the experience that they had, but they don't identify with Tennessee State playing Southern Missouri. They don't identify with Tennessee State playing Kiwi out of Georgia. They don't identify with them playing, other schools of that nature. They identify with an HBCU experience. That's our experience. That's our tradition. And I think from a very jerk reaction, they decided to bring in Coach George because of what was happening in Jackson, which was a good thing. And you brought in people who really knew very little about the history of HBC schools, and they had broad ideas. And I think that those broad ideas in some way, shape, or form have rubbed the fiber of HBCU schools, and rightfully so. That's my take on it.
We only got a few minutes left, but I want to get Earl in on this because we had an earlier conversation. But before I go to you, Earl, and I remember Eddie George saying, "Why won't people come out? We're winning." I think they were, Mike. I think they were like 5-3 at that time, and I'm like, dude, TSU folks will be asking, "You're not winning." They'll be asking, "What's wrong? Y'all 5-3. You done lost 3 games already? Are you crazy?" But this thing, Earl, we talked about it earlier. I think bringing in somebody that's played the NFL does not automatically mean your program is going to be successful. I mean, Deion did a tremendous job at Jackson State, but speak to that part of it, where some of these schools are, oh, he played in the NFL, he'll work. And I think that's the mistake TSU made in hiring Eddie George, because with all due respect to Coach George, I think it was a mistake bringing him in.
Well, I've lived by this one mantra for a long time, Ricky. The greatest college coaches were never the greatest college players. And I'm gonna stand on that forever, because the facts are just in that. If you name a great college coach, whether it's football or basketball, if you go back and look at what kind of player they were a student of the game. They were not a great player. So that's my first thing. One thing that, I would hope that maybe Tennessee State realizes, and Joe makes a very good point, that the alumni of Tennessee State relates to a HBCU experience. They don't really relate to the OVC experience. You're in the OVC, but that's all well and good. prior to the OVC, I don't recall Tennessee State ever being in a conference. They were always an independent, right? But yet they were able to be named the Black College champion based on their record. Well, the way this alignment sets up right now, Tennessee State will never be a Black College champion in football ever again because they're not in one of the two conferences.
That's right.
If it was up to me, I would urge, I would beg, I would ask Tennessee State, please consider joining the MEAC. The SWAC has got 12. They don't need another one, but bring that to the MEAC and raise that MEAC brand up to a whole point where now you get back into that HBCU mix where they're going to play the teams in the MEAC, the Howards, the North Carolina Centrals, the South Carolina States, but it gives you a chance to win the MEAC, and you could end up playing in the Celebration Bowl to play for a national championship. Until that happens, Tennessee State is not going to ever see a championship called Black College National Champions ever again. And I think, you know, in a day and time when the media and the platforms and social media are giving so much opportunity for our brand to be seen so that we can promote us. We don't have to keep running and saying, well, we need other folks to promote us. We can do this on our own. I think Byron Allen is in a great position to make all of this happen from a media standpoint and a TV standpoint. So they didn't want us. Now they do want us. When we make something popular, now they want to take it from us. Let's keep this our own. And there's nothing wrong with just being the Black College National Champions because, hey, we're not going to ever win the championship. Let's be clear about that. We're not going to ever get there. We're not going to ever be playing on New Year's Day and New Year's week after New Year's to win that championship. It's not going to ever happen for HBCUs. But the Celebration Bowl, that $1.2 million that each school gets, that's very tangible, very doable. Let's keep our brand where we are and strengthen it. And that's just the way I see it.
I love that.
Mike, as we take this thing home, and Joe, you got to come back because I got 1,000 more questions, man, for you. So we're going to have to get you back, Mike.
Right. Yeah. And the thing about it is that I can't remember who was second, but as of since the Celebration Bowls have been kicking off, we were still in front with the most national championships. But
That's
I
correct.
can't remember if the FAMU was behind us or not. And
We're at 17 now, Mike.
Okay.
It's
All right. But yeah, but my thing also is that, you know, when I was at TSU, I was right at the transition point. So when I first got there, we were still independent. And then all of a sudden the OVC thing happened like my junior year. And I said, oh boy, I don't know if I like this. But we were number one in 1AA because that's what the rankings was back then. You had Yale, Harvard, and all those schools were up there that we were competing against. So it has been, you know, a whole different change. And then also, Earl, remember that 2000 team really had a chance to get a national championship. Those early years with LC. So that team, you know, that made the playoffs. And I think we lost to A&T. We lost to A&T. Yeah, the quarterbacks got hurt.
Y'all got to the semifinals?
It was they lost to they lost to A&T, but I think A&T ended up losing to Georgia Southern or somebody like that.
Okay.
But yeah,
Yeah,
the championship was in Chattanooga because I was going to go if we made it to the championship. But it's just like you said though, the one thing about it is that one school that can do well as independent and stay independent on the higher levels, Notre Dame. That's why that game that we played was like, boom, you had the HBCU independent legendary team, and then you had the independent team in the D1 level or FSC or whatever it's called.
FCS.
But as you said, that us not being in a conference and it basically having MEAC, SWAC, you know, that really excludes a lot, you know, and as you said, it'd be hard for us to get into the SWAC because the numbers just won't work unless it's us in Hampton, you know, to make it 14.
I just don't see making it 14. I mean, let's not lose our conference. Let's not lose the MEAC because everybody's trying to pile in the swag. Let's keep that and make that balance work, because the MEAC has everything else but football right now as far as the strength. When Bethune-Cookman and Florida A&M left, and then A&T and Hampton left, it depleted them of 4 schools. Let's build that back up. Let's get the MEAC back up to at least 8 schools. Some folks want North Carolina A&T to come back to the MEAC, saying that being in the Coastal Athletic Conference, it's okay, but you're not going to ever be the national champion. In order to be the national champion, you got to be at the MEAC or the SWAC, and that's how it's going to be. So winning the CAA, winning the OVC is going, okay, you won the conference, but you're not the national champion. You went to the
my daughter's a Hampton alum, and she hates the fact that they moved on and gone to I think they're in the Big South.
No, it's the CAA. They changed it to the Coastal Athletic Association.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
And I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more about this. This is a very good conversation. And I think this conversation could be dedicated on our next show. I talked with Doug, and I want to overemphasize this. If you look at what they're doing, they have the HBCU football game. It's going to be coming up in February, which is for the all-star HBC schools. Yep. Of course, they will have the game in the summer, which is now being hosted in Canton, Ohio, the first game. And then they've got the HBCU Hall of Fame. And Doug makes this very clear, very pointed, that those schools that you mentioned, Hampton, they are right now communicating what we're talking about to these presidents to say, hey, look, wake up. There's an alignment that's going on right before our eyes. Don't you see it? Why can't we align?
Yep.
Align. And with the advent of streaming television, now you can actually go out and enhance your capabilities, because look, all of these kids are not going to be able to go to these Power 4 schools. And even Tennessee State just got a kid from the University of Tennessee. You're going to be able to get other ethnicities coming into the HBC school. In other words, all I'm trying to say is that there is now a bridge where you can kind of bridge the gap a little bit. But if they do not move on it, then it's probably something that won't happen the way that we think that it can happen. And I see it, as you said, Earl, Tennessee State, which is one of the greatest schools in the world's HBC, does not have an opportunity to play in the championship game. And there's something wrong with that. I'll leave it with that. That's a conversation.
But Joey, I do have one more question for you, Joey. But before I ask, I'm going to ask the last question tonight. I want Joey to comment on this. But Earl, I do want you to talk about Fortify Back and the BIP Awards. And I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to get more into that. And of course, your great book, The Forgotten QBs.
Well, real quick, we are in the process of getting ready to do our balloting for the BIP Memorial Trophy, named after Oliver Bibb Joyce, the fallen FAMU quarterback. Right now, we have 6 candidates from the HBCU level. 3 of the 4 top guys are out of the SIAC. So we're looking forward to seeing how that's going to go. Jeremy Musa put himself in a great position after winning the Celebration Bowl and moving his numbers up to being close to Aeneas Dennis from Benedict and David Wright from Allen. On the high school level, there is a young man coming out of Willis, Texas. His name is Derek DJ Lagway. He has thrown for 4,600 yards and 58 touchdowns this year. He was just named the Max Prep National Player of the Year. He's a 6'3" quarterback out of Willis, Texas, Willis High School. He's on his way to the University of Florida. Right now, he is at the top of the list, but it's left up to the advisory council to vote. But we're looking forward to maybe him being that guy, since he has got a big difference. But there are 6 guys out of the state of North Carolina that are in our top 10 on our watch list. So our decision for the BIP Memorial Trophy will be coming out in January.
outstanding.
Ricky, can I ask him a quick question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Rhetorical question, Earl. Earl, so how would you have ranked, just hypothetically, how would you have ranked Joe, who we're speaking to today, and then Joe Gilliam, and then during my era, Gilbert Renfro? How would you have ranked them if we're hypothetically doing that, this awards during those years?
Rank them against each other, just rank them against guys they played
against during their time frame.
Well, here's the thing, man. Tennessee State threw the ball so much, man. You know, Joe probably had 4,000 yards in one season, and the closest guy to him might have had 2,000. So it was very easy to make that decision. Same thing with Gilbert Renfro. Same thing with Petaway. Same thing with Jefferson Street. You guys threw the ball so much at Tennessee State, man. You know, y'all were so prolific. And you did it with such style, you know, you guys drop back. You don't take the sideways, drop your back up, and then you sit back there and you look all pretty in all the red, white, and blue, and you're just looking around 10 seconds. No, man, you that's not a fair question. My comment.
Okay. But you know but really what Earl is saying, and literally I am getting chills just thinking about that as a kid growing up and going out to the whole Hell Stadium with my father, watching games and watching the beauty that was Tennessee State football back then. It was. Joe mentioned a ballet earlier. That's what it was. And everybody did it with style. And like you said, you had the nickname, the Lord's Prayer. Come on, man.
You got the Lord's Prayer, Jefferson Street, Joe, and 747 Adams.
Yeah, Mike and I had the great Claude Humphrey on, and he was on our show a few years ago, and he said after playing all those years in professional football league that and I know you remember this, he said Eldridge Dickey was the best football player he ever saw. All those years in the NFL, he said Eldridge Dickey was the best football player he ever saw. But Joey, as you see these young guns, black quarterbacks enter the NFL at the beginning of the year, 16 teams had black quarterbacks starting for them. And you see the prolific play of Lamar Jackson and Mahomes, and just on and on. You know, they stand on your shoulders. They stand on Dickey's shoulders. Do you take a sense of pride in that?
When I see that kid, C.J. Stroud, play football, I'm just at awe. I'm just at awe when I watch him play. He is something just totally special. And Lamar, I mean, look at Lamar. This guy right now, he's about to change the whole dynamic of the game itself because of the fact that he has something that he wasn't given credit for it. But he had all these attributes before he got to Baltimore. They just weren't exploited. They saw him as a guy who could just run the football. Now he's showing them, I can throw the football. And then when you put me in a situation to where you force me to run, oh my Lord, I'm Eldridge Dickey all over again. Oh, by the way, guys, I want to tell you this, and this is what made me think of this. On YouTube right now, there are games. I don't know who this gentleman is, but he's got some of Eldridge Dickey football games that he played, and I had a chance to watch him, and I was just at awe because I had never seen a lot of his games at Tennessee State. I think they didn't have the film or whatever, but he is now on YouTube.
You may have seen that on our YouTube station. I have that posted. Wow. You probably saw that on. Yeah.
I think I saw him in the Grantland Rice Bowl. I was just you know what I was all about? The formations that they were using back then.
That was 1965. And Nolan Smith returns a punt.
Oh, God.
Late in the game against Ball State.
God. Yeah, I think it was Ball State. The formations that they were using back then, it just blew my mind because you got a chance you can slow it down. I'm looking at those formations saying, this is what they're doing in the NFL right now. And they did that during Eldridge time. It's amazing. So I said that to say this. Lamar Jackson, this kid, look, he is something really, really special. And CJ Stroud, my goodness, he's just a babe. The way he slings that ball, it just blows. I'm at it all watching these kids. So yeah, kudos to all those guys. Kudos.
So once again, congratulations to Joey, member of the class of 2024 Black College Football Hall of Fame. The induction ceremony will take place June 8th, 2024 in Atlanta, Georgia. The Lord willing, I'll be there to cheer you on. Joey, you guys are also going to be recognized at the All-Star HBCU Legacy Bowl.
Right.
February 24th in New Orleans. Hey, man, thank you so much. This has been a fantastic conversation, and we're going to pick back up on it. The Forgotten Quarterback, where can people get that, Earl?
Go to Quarter 5 Back. That's quarter, PHIback.com. And you can order it from me online through that website.
Okay. God bless you, everybody. And to our viewers out there, it's been a great year. Merry Christmas to you. Happy New Year from my great friend, frat brother, Mike Robinson, the legendary 747, the great Earl Kitchen. I'm Rick Hampton. Peace, everybody.
Peace.